We all have things that we're believing for, dreams that we want to accomplish, problems we're hoping will turn around. Maybe it's to see our family restored, to lose some weight, to break an addiction, to start our own business. But sometimes as it goes on, month after month, even year after year, and we don't see anything changing, it's easy to get discouraged and think, it's never gonna happen. This is as good as it gets. I'll just learn to live with it. We all go through disappointments, setbacks, loss. Pain is a part of life. It's easy to get discouraged, even bitter. Think, why is this happening to me? Sometimes we look at pieces in our lives that don't make sense. The key is what we do in our times of pain. Pain will change us. Heartache, loss, disappointments, they don't leave us the same. Every painful time, even though you don't like it, it's developing something in you that can only be developed in the tough times. Eventually, that will pass. You'll get through it, but you will be different. In those tough times, when you're uncomfortable, going through a loss, dealing with an illness, you could easily let it overwhelm you. Now, how the pain changes you is up to you. You can come out bitter, or you can come out better. You can come out defeated, giving up on your dreams, or you can come out with a new passion, a new fire, excited about the new opportunities in front of you. I may not like it, but I'm not a whiner, I'm a warrior. I know I can handle this. Don't complain about the pain. Without the pain, we couldn't reach the fullness of our destinies. Sometimes we bring pain on ourselves. We make poor choices, get in a relationship we know is not good, or maybe get over our head in our spending. Now it's painful. We're having to deal with the consequences. All of us experience pain. My challenge, don't just go through it, grow through it. That difficulty is an opportunity to get stronger, to develop character, to gain new competence. Anybody can give up. Anybody can let it overwhelm you. But you know what that's doing? Wasting your pain. That pain is not there to stop you. It's there to prepare you, to increase you, to develop you. Difficulties are a part of life. Now quit telling yourself you can't take it. You're not weak. You are well able. Eventually the pain will pass. You'll give birth to new strength. Just because it hasn't happened yet doesn't mean that it's not going to happen. And there will always be forces trying to convince us to settle where we are. Life has a way of pushing our dreams down. They can become buried under discouragement, buried under past mistakes. There are dreams buried under divorce, buried under low self-esteem. It's easy to settle for mediocrity even though we have all this potential buried on the inside. What are you remembering? The hurt, the pain, what didn't work out? Turn it around and remember your dream. Have you allowed any dreams to get buried in you? At one time, you believed you could do something great. You believed you could lead the company in sales. You believed you could break that addiction. And it's been a long time, had some bad breaks, wasn't all your fault. You could easily settle where you are. Nobody would fault you. The enemy would love to deceive you into burying your dream, thinking that it's never going to work out. Don't believe those lies. It's not too late to become all that you were created to be. Every time you remember your dream, you're removing some dirt. You're digging it back out. The true mark of a champion is even though some dirt gets thrown on your dream, instead of letting it get buried, you keep shaking it off. You keep moving forward. You wouldn't be having that opposition if you didn't have something great in you. If your dream wasn't alive and on track, right on schedule to come to pass, you wouldn't have so many things coming against you. That dream is still alive. You may have tried a year ago, 5 years ago, or 40 years ago. Didn't work out. Nobody was there to help you. Go back and try again. This is your time. This is your moment. Your destiny is calling out to you. Can I tell you, your dream is not dead. It's just not in season. Your time is coming. Promotion is coming. Good breaks are coming. Promises you've been standing on. Dreams you've been praying about. Lack is not your destiny. Constantly struggling, barely getting by is not the end of your story. These light afflictions are for a moment. The adversity is temporary. The glory is eternal. There are some dreams shut up in you. Like fire, you're going to feel your destiny calling out. May not have happened the first time. The loan didn't go through. You didn't get chosen for the part. The medical report wasn't good. That's okay. It's still in you. This is your time. This is your moment. Shake off the doubt. Shake off the negativity. You're at the right place. You're at the right time. Now all you've got to do is get in the right frame of mind. Lord, I believe this is my year to get healthy and whole. This is my year to meet the people of my dreams. This is my year to go further in my career, to step into a new level of my destiny. This is my year to accomplish dreams, to break free from this depression. This is my year to meet the right people. This is my year to get healthy and whole. This is your year to see double. This is your year for vindication, for restoration, for new beginnings. Now get your mind going in the right direction.
Life has proximal meanings, right? There's the meaning that you experience when you're engaged in a piece of art, or when you're reading, or when you're engrossed in a movie or in a conversation. There's the meaning that emerges within your relationships with people that you cherish or are enthusiastic with. There's meanings of security and predictability. There's meanings of duty and responsibility and active engagement with your job and your career. There's meanings of aesthetic pleasure. Now, all of those have their value, and each of them has their place. And maybe there's a hierarchy of value there as well, so that some of those meanings are deeper than others. And then you might say, well, what characterized the deepest of all meanings? And it would be something like relationship with the transcendent, and that would establish a relationship between you and what's always been conceptualized as God, which is generally supposed to be something ineffable, right? It's not definable, but you might think about it as the central animating spirit of the age, or the value around which all other values are organized, or the wisdom of the ages, or the creative spirit that possesses you when you're inspired, or what grips you with enthusiasm at a sports event or at a musical event. All of those things. And we need a relationship with that. And we find our deepest meaning in that relationship. And if we don't find it, I think, if we don't find it in something that's explicitly religious, then we tend to magnify something of lesser value, say something political, into that to fill the void. So yes, life has proximal meanings without God, without eternity, but at the ultimate level, something's lacking. And it's the desire to fulfill that lack that, and maybe the lack itself, that's part and parcel of the religious instinct. So you can kill God, but you can't. That doesn't rectify the hunger for God. And then that hunger seeks out replacements. That's how it looks to me. So, and then, you might also say, well, does that mean you have to believe in God? And I don't think of the proper answer to that is that you need to agree with a propositional statement. Does God exist? Yes. Like, is this table there? Yes. It's not that kind of relationship. I mean, it's characterized in the Old Testament as a struggle. So Israel means those who struggle with God. And you have to participate in that struggle. And you can do that, weirdly enough, as a believer or as a non-believer. Maybe sometimes more intensely as a non-believer. The issue might be more paramount then, the issue of virtue and the issue of the ultimate orientation. If you're plagued by bouts of depression and anxiety, that does destabilize your identity. So it's almost by definition. But having said that, look, this is when habit and plan and strategy are so useful. So in the periods of depression that I've had, and some of them were long and certainly the most unpleasant experiences of my life. This is when you need a philosophy, let's say, that's allied with your vision and your strategy to sustain you. Because what would happen to me is that, I have a vision, and I suppose the vision is of a world that's better, that's less likely to descend into ideological catastrophe, and where people are more responsible and more awake and more educated and healthier. All of that, a vision of a better world, a world that's less hellish at least, but also a better world, and some sense of what role I might play in that. And so that's very motivating. Like, it's a profound goal to try to make things better. And you can do that locally. You can do that for yourself. You can do that for your family. You can do that for the broader community. And all of that's worth it, man. It's worth making some sacrifices for. It's worth suffering for to some degree. And then you decompose that into the day-to-day and week-to-week strategies and actions that you're undertaking, the plans and the activities that you're putting forward to make that dream a reality, to realize it. And then when the depression and anxiety come along, you think, part of it with depression, it's just bloody endurance. It's like you get up and you work through the next hour, you try to stay on track, you try to implement your strategic plans to the best of your ability, and you hope and you pray that you'll get through it. You'll get through it, and that the darkness will recede, and you stay on track. You eat even though you're not hungry. You get up even though you want to stay in bed. You interact with people even though you'd rather be alone. And it's the benefit of disciplined habits can sustain you. It's like the boat you're rowing in through a terrible storm, leaks and all, and maybe you'll be overwhelmed, but you have the boat and you can row forward, and that's what you've got.
So imagine you're dealing with someone who's hoarding. Now, people who are hoarding are often older or neurologically damaged, or they have obsessive compulsive disorder. But then you walk into their house and there's like 10,000 things in their house. There's maybe 100 boxes, and you open up a box, and in the box there's some pens and some old passports and some checks and their collection of silver dollars and some hypodermic needles and some dust and a dead mouse and there's boxes and boxes and boxes like that in the house. It's absolute chaos in there. Absolute chaos, not order, chaos. And then you think, is that their house, or is that their being? Is that their mind? And the answer is, there's no difference. There's no difference. So, I could say, well, if you want to organize your psyche, you could start by organizing your room. If that would be easier, because maybe you're a more concrete person and you need something concrete to do. So you go clean up under your bed and you make your bed and you organize the papers on your desk, and you think, well, just exactly what are you organizing? Are you organizing the objective world, or are you objecting your field, or are you organizing your field of being, like your field of total experience? And Jung believed that, and I think there's a Buddhist doctrine that's sort of nested in there, that at the highest level of psychological integration, there's no difference between you and what you experience. Now you think, well, I can't control everything I experience, but that's no objection, because you can't control yourself anyway. So the mere fact that you can't extend control over everything you experience is no argument against the idea that you should still treat that as an extension of yourself. So you could say, well, let's say you have a long-standing feud with your brother. Well, is that a psychological problem? Is that him? Is it a problem in the objective world, or is it a problem in your field of being? And it's very useful to think that way, because you might ask, what could you do to improve yourself? Well, let's step one step backwards. The first question might be, why should you even bother improving yourself? And I think the answer to that is something like, so you don't suffer any more stupidly than you have to. And maybe so others don't have to either. It's something like that. You know, like there's a real injunction at the bottom of it. It's not some casual self-help doctrine. It's that if you don't organize yourself properly, you'll pay for it, and in a big way, and so will the people around you. Now, and you could say, well, I don't care about that, but that's actually not true. You actually do care about that, because if you're in pain, you will care about it. And so you do care about it, even if it's just that negative way, you know. It's very rare that you can find someone who's in excruciating pain who would ever say, well, it would be no better if I was out of this. It's sort of pain is one of those things that brings the idea that it would be better if it didn't exist along with it. It's incontrovertible. So you get your act together so that there isn't any more stupid pain around you than necessary. Well, so then the question might be, well, how would you go about getting your act together? And the answer to that, and this is a phenomenological idea too, it's something like, look around for something that bothers you and see if you can fix it. So now you think, well, let's say you go into you can do this in a room. It's quite fun to do it just when you're sitting in a room, like a room, maybe your bedroom. You can sit there and just sort of meditate on it and think, okay, if I wanted to spend 10 minutes making this room better, what would I have to do? And you have to ask yourself that, right? It's not a command, it's like a genuine question. And things will pop out in the room that you know, like there's a stack of papers over there that's kind of bugging you, and you know that maybe little order there would be a good thing, and you know there's some rubbish behind your computer monitor that you haven't attended to for like 6 months, and the room would be slightly better if it was a little less dusty and the cables weren't all tangled up the same way. And like if you allow yourself just to consider the expanse in which you exist at that moment, there'll be all sorts of things that'll pop out in it that you could just fix. And you know, I might say, well, if you were coming to see me for psychotherapy, this easiest thing for us to do first would just be to get you to organize your room. You think, well, is that psychotherapy? And the answer is, well, it depends on how you conceive the limits of your being. And I would say, start where you can start. You know, if something announces itself to you, which is a strange way of thinking about it, as in need of repair, that you could repair, then, hey, fix it. You fix 100 things like that, your life will be a lot different. Now, I often tell people too, fix the things you repeat every day, because people tend to think of those as trivial, right? You get up, you brush your teeth, you have your breakfast, you know, you have your routines that you go through every day. Well, those probably constitute 50% of your life. And people think, well, they're mundane, I don't need to pay attention to them. It's like, no, that's exactly wrong. The things you do every day, those are the most important things you do. Hands down. All you have to do is do the arithmetic. You figure it out right away. So 100 adjustments to your broader domain of being, and there's a lot less rubbish around, and a lot fewer traps for you to step into. And so that's in keeping with Jung's idea about erasing once you've got your mind and your emotions together, and once you're acting that out, then you can extend what you're willing to consider yourself and start fixing up the things that are part of your broader extent. Now, sometimes you don't know how to do that. So you might say, imagine you're walking down Bloor Street and there's this guy who's like alcoholic and schizophrenic and has been on the streets for 10 years. He sort of stumbles towards you and, you know, incoherently mutters something. That's a problem. And it would be good if you could fix it, but you haven't got a clue about how to fix that. You just walk around that and go find something that you could fix, because if you muck about in that, not only is it unlikely that you'll help that person, it's very likely that you'll get hurt yourself. So, you know, just because while you're experiencing things announce themselves as in need of repair doesn't mean that it's you right then and there that should repair them. You have to have some humility. You know, you don't walk up to a helicopter that isn't working and just start tinkering away with it. You have to stay within your domain of competence. But most of the time, if people look at their lives, you know, it's a very interesting thing to do. I like the idea of the room, because you can do that at the drop of a hat. You know, you go back to where you live and sit down and think, okay, I'm going to make this place better for half an hour. What should I do? And you have to ask and things will just pop up like mad. And it's partly because your mind is a very strange thing. As soon as you give it a name, a genuine aim, it'll reconfigure the world in keeping with that aim. That's actually how you see to begin with. And so if you set it a task, especially, you have to be genuine about it, which is why you have to bring your thoughts and emotions together, and then you have to get them in your body so you're acting consistently. You have to be genuine about the aim, but once you aim, the world will reconfigure itself around that aim, which is very strange. And it's technically true. You know, the best example of that, you have all seen this video where you watch the basketballs being tossed back and forth between members of the white team versus the black team, and while you're doing that, a gorilla walks up into the middle of the video and you don't see it. It's like, you know, if you thought about that experiment for about 5 years, that would be about the right amount of time to spend thinking about it. Because what it shows you is that you see what you aim at. And that, man, if you can get one thing through your head as a consequence of even being in university, that would be a good one. You see what you aim at. And so because one inference you might draw from that is, be careful what you aim at. Right? What you aim at determines the way the world manifests itself to you. And so if the world is manifesting itself in a very negative way, one thing to ask is, are you aiming at the right thing? Now, you know, I'm not trying to reduce everybody's problems to an improper aim. People get cut off at the knees for all sorts of reasons. You know, they get sick, they have accidents. There's a random element to being, that's for sure. And so you don't want to take anything, even that particular phrase, too far. You want to bind it with the fact that random things do happen to people, but it's still a great thing to ask. Okay, so Rogers was a phenomenologist, and he was interested in, he didn't start his philosophy from the perspective of subject versus object, or from the idea of psyche, like sort of inside you, your mind with its layers. That's not how he looked at it. And so let's go through, well, I'll introduce you to Rogers. I think and then we'll talk about it more next time. I'm going to start, though, with something that I learned from him that I think was of crucial importance. And so we'll set the stage for the further discussion with this. And I'm going to read it to you. Assuming a minimal mutual willingness to be in contact and to receive communications, we may say that the greater the communicated congruence of experience, awareness, and behavior on the part of one individual, the more the ensuing relationship will involve a tendency towards reciprocal communication with the same qualities, mutually accurate understanding of the communications, improved psychological adjustment and functioning in both parties, and mutual satisfaction in the relationship. It's quite a mouthful. What does it mean? Assuming a minimal mutual willingness to be in contact and to receive communications. Okay, we're having a conversation. I'm deciding I'm going to listen to you. Right? That's different than how people generally communicate, because usually when they communicate, they're doing something like, okay, we're going to have a conversation and I'm going to tell you why I'm right and I'll win if you agree. Or maybe you're having a conversation where, I don't know what you're trying to do. Maybe you're trying to impress the person you're talking to. So you're not listening to them at all. You're just thinking about what you're going to say next. Okay, so that's not this. This is, you might have something to tell me. And so I'm going to listen on the off chance that you'll tell me something that would really be useful for me to know. And so you could think about it as an extension of the Piagetian, you know, Piaget talked about the fundamentally important element of knowledge being to describe how knowledge is sought, the process by which knowledge is generated. Well, if you agree with me and I find that out, I know nothing more than I knew before. I just know what I knew before. And maybe I'm happy about that because, you know, it didn't get challenged. But I'm no smarter than I was before. But maybe you're different than me, and so while I'm listening to you, you'll tell me something I don't like. Maybe it's something I find contemptible or difficult, whatever. Maybe you'll tell me something I don't know, and then I won't be quite as stupid. And then maybe I won't run painfully into quite as many things. And that's a really useful thing to know, especially if you live with someone and you're trying to make long-term peace with them, is they're not the same as you. And their way they look at the world and the facts that they pull out of the world aren't the same as your facts. And even though you're going to be overwhelmed with the proclivity to demonstrate that you're right, it is the case that two brains are better than one. And so maybe 9 of the 10 things they tell you are dispensable, or maybe even 49 out of 50, but one thing, all you need to get out of the damn conversation is one thing you don't know. And one of the things that's very cool about a good psychotherapeutic session is that the whole conversation is like that. All you're doing is trying to express the truth of the situation as clearly as possible. That's it. And so now Roger's proposition, and I'll tell you why he derived it, was that if you have a conversation like that with someone, it will make both of you better. It'll make both of you psychologically healthier. So there's an implicit presupposition that the exchange of truth is curative. Well, that's a very cool idea. I mean, it's a very deep idea. I think it's the most profound idea. It's the idea upon which Western civilization, although not only Western civilization, is actually predicated. The idea that truth produces health. But for Rogers, that was the entire purpose of the Psychotherapeutic Alliance. You come to see me because you want to be better. You don't even know what that means necessarily, neither do I. We're going to figure that out together. But you come and you say, look, things are not acceptable to me, and maybe there's something I could do about that. So that's the minimal precondition to engage in therapy. Something's wrong, you're willing to talk about it truthfully, and you want it to be better. Without that, the therapeutic relationship does not get off the ground. And so then you might ask, well, what relationships are therapeutic? And the answer to that would be, if you have a real relationship, it's therapeutic. If it isn't, what you have is not a relationship. God only knows what you have. You're a slave, they're a tyrant, you know, you're both butting heads with one another. It's a primate dominance hierarchy dispute. Oh, I don't know, you're like 2 cats in a barrel, or 2 people with their hands around each other's throats. But what you have is not a relationship. So, all right. We may say that the greater the communicated congruence of experience, awareness, and behavior on the part of one individual, that's a reference to the same idea that I was describing with regards to Jung. So let's say you come and talk to me and you want things to go well. Well, I'm going to have to more or less be one thing, because if I'm all over the place, you can't trust any continuity in what I say. There's no reason for you to believe that I'm capable of actually telling you, I'm capable of expressing anything that's true. So the truth is something that emerges as a consequence of getting yourself lined up and beating all the, what would you call, all the impurities out of your soul.
What steps should someone take to start developing delayed gratification when they constantly give in to instant gratification?
Well, okay, imagine, I know the answer to this to some real degree, because I had graduate students in particular who I picked because they were very smart and often very creative, but sometimes they weren't very conscientious. So they had a hard time delaying gratification. And so, well, I would say, if you would like to discipline yourself, which is a very good idea, you need to pick a direction. Pick a direction you want to go first. Pick a goal you would like to attain. And a medium to long-term goal. You might imagine something you need and want, some attainment that would motivate, whose pursuit would motivate you. And you can ask yourself that. It's a good question to ask yourself in general, you know. It's a very good question to ask yourself is, if you could have what you needed and wanted, what would that be? And that's a meditative question. You don't want to force an answer out of yourself. You want to ask yourself that like you would ask someone else. If I could have what I wanted, what would that look like? And you can ask yourself that in a more differentiated way. If I could have the relationship that I needed and wanted, if I could have the friendships, if I could have the job or career, if I could have the educational pathway, if I could adopt civic responsibility in an optimized manner, if I could engage in some creative enterprise, if I took care of myself properly, if I regulated my susceptibility to temptations, what would that look like if it was optimized? And then that sets you up a goal that has some motivational force. This is worth doing.
And then you might find, well, you don't do it anyways. And then I would say, well, that's because you're biting off more than you can chew. The next goal is to take your goal and to fragment it into micro goals until you find a micro goal that's small enough that it still presents some challenge that you will do. And so I've become, one of the things I'm known for, I suppose, is my advice to people to clean up their rooms. And the people who think I'm their enemy laugh about that rule because of its simplicity, let's say. But the only reason they think it's simple is because they've never tried it. It's actually extremely difficult. And it was very frequently the case that, well, it's very difficult to put your room, your office, your bedroom in order. I mean, you think about your bedroom, hypothetically, let's say you're married, you share that room with someone else. Is your bedroom in order? Really? And I don't just mean, is it neat? Maybe it's too neat. Maybe it's too orderly. Maybe it's too sterile. Maybe it's too bare. Maybe that characterizes your whole bloody relationship. Maybe, really? And maybe that is genuinely reflected in the state of your room, because it's very probable that that room is a microcosm of your marriage. It's highly probable. And so what that would mean is to organize that room would require the organization of your marital life, not least because if you want to put that room in order, you're going to have to negotiate with your wife about how that's going to be done. And while you're making that negotiation, even in relationship to the micro details, you're going to encounter almost everything that's wrong with your relationship. And so you might ask yourself when you walk into your bedroom, I hate this bedroom. It's like, you should really think that through. And then you need to think through what you would need to do so that you love that room. Or even more complexly, so that you both loved it. Because that's a tough thing to attain, boy. Because you're going to have differences in taste. You're going to have differences in orderliness. There's all sorts of things that you're going to have to negotiate in order to make that room you both inhabit jointly desirable. Anyways, you set yourself a goal. Ask yourself what goal you want to set. And then break the goal down into steps that are small enough so that even someone as pathetic as you could manage them. And that requires a tremendous humility. I know it was frequently the case, for example, with my clients, that I would do an analysis of their situation in life, and let's say, just for the sake of argument, that someone was 30, living at home, in the bedroom they grew up in high school, in a complete bloody state of disorder, both moral and practical. And one of the relatively simple steps that we might agree upon with regards to moving forward is the person might think, well, I'm 30, I'm really immature, I haven't taken any responsibility for my life, my mother still makes my bed and cleans up after me. It's like, well, why don't you just start with that? Because you're not going to just fix your life. Why don't you just try to clean up your room like you're a mature 14-year-old instead of a dreadfully dismal 30-year-old. And so, first of all, it's really hard for someone, even if they're desperate, to admit that that's necessary, right? Because it's so bloody humiliating. You mean, really, I'm so damn useless that my basic goal is going to be to clean up my bedroom? It's like, well, looks like it. And actually, it's worse than that, because then you ask the person, you negotiate with the person, they say, well, I'll try to clean up my room. Then they come back the next week and they say, I had one client, this was so funny, he's going to vacuum his rug. That was his goal for the week. He just had a child out of wedlock, and he was afraid that he was going to be a very bad father, which was a very realistic fear. And so he wanted to put himself together, and so that's why he came to see me. And he lived in this squalor, and one thing we decided to do was that he could vacuum the rug, which he hadn't done for like 12 years because his mother would do it. And so it was so funny, it's so unbelievably comical. He went and got the vacuum, a stand-up vacuum, an upright vacuum, and he brought it into his room, but he didn't bring it all the way in. He put it in the doorway leaning like this across the doorway. And then instead of vacuuming his room, he stepped over that bloody vacuum cleaner for a whole week and then came and told me that he couldn't do it. It's like, it's not surprising to me at all, because you think, well, that's such a trivial thing. It's like, if it was such a trivial thing, he'd have a clean room. It's not trivial at all. That chaos in his immediate environment was deeply emblematic of the chaos of his life. They were the same thing. And so for him to even begin the process of bringing order to chaos, which is a divine process, by the way, and the highest moral requirement, he had to be willing to face the catastrophe, the chaotic catastrophe of his life. And he hadn't done that for like 30 years. Why was he going to start that week? Just because he said he was going to? It's like, good luck. So what you do as a therapist in that situation is you just make the task smaller until you find a task so small, but still moving forward, that the person will do. So I might have said, I don't remember the particulars of the situation, I might have said, well, do you think you can get that vacuum cleaner, do you think you could move it out of the doorway into your room? That's all you have to do this week. Do you think you can do that? And I'd say that and offer that without being contemptuous. Like, you have to be very careful about such things. And I know that this is more complicated than it looks. And I also know that the first step taken towards the domination of chaos and its transformation into order is a cardinal and difficult step. And so you can make it small, and that's fine, it'll still work. So I might say, well, just move the vacuum cleaner inside your room. And then I would also say to someone in that situation, don't do more than that. If the agreement that you've made with me and with yourself is that that's enough, abide by the contract that you've written with yourself and allow yourself to be grateful for the fact that you had the courage to take even a single step forward. And don't push your bloody luck, because maybe you'll have a brief fit and vacuum the whole rug, and then you'll be so annoyed at how you've destabilized your entire life that you'll redouble your attempts to make a mess, and the place will be more like hell than ever for 2 months. It's very probable that that sort of thing will occur if you break the contract you've set with yourself. The upside of this is, because you think, oh my God, that's so dismal, I have to start that low. It's like, yeah, probably, especially if it's a real difficult thing you're trying to sort out. You have to start as low as you are useless, and that's low. So, but the upside is that progress accelerates, it's not linear, and so if you take once you take the first step, the probability that you'll take a slightly larger second step increases, and that increases non-linearly. And so once you get the ball rolling, so to speak, once you start pushing the rock uphill, you can do it faster and faster. And so even if you have to start in a very humiliating manner, that doesn't mean that's where you'll end. One of the things that Tammy and I learned to do, and this was a consequence of me being trained as a behavior therapist, is, we'll just take an example that maybe I was trying to learn how to compliment her when she dressed nicely. And maybe the fact that I wasn't good at that was manifest in the fact that she'd put some effort into her dress, and then I wouldn't respond in the appropriate manner, and that would dishearten her. And I don't particularly remember that exactly happening, but it'll be a perfectly reasonable example. And so then she would be displeased. And then the question would be, well, is she displeased because I'm too stupid to offer a proper compliment? Or is she displeased because she's so needy and lacking confidence that she needs a compliment that would go beyond the ordinary? And the answer is, what the hell do we know? Could be one or the other or both. And so what's a possible solution to that? And one possible solution would be, okay, if you do put some effort into your appearance, or I do, we could reverse the situation, but if you put some effort into your appearance, and you would like to hear from me exactly the words that would reward you for doing that and provide you with the confidence to attempt it again in the future, what would those words be?
You look good without a beard, dear.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah. Very funny. Very funny. And so
And then you can say, well, if you tell me those words, I will repeat them back to you. And then the person who needs the words might object, well, that's false, it's superficial, it's artificial, it's not spontaneous. And if you really loved me, I wouldn't have to tell you what to say. It's like, well, all of that's wrong. It's like, just because I love you doesn't mean I'm not stupid. And so, in fact, I love you might even be evidence that I am, in fact, stupid. So like, help me out here. I don't know what you want, and maybe you could just tell me, and then I'll tell you what you want, and I'll do it stupidly and badly. But I'll be slightly better at it the next time, and maybe if you let me practice 50 times stupidly and badly, I'll get reasonably good at it, and then that's something that we'll be both good at for the rest of our lives. And that's something worth knowing. You know, if you imagine you're upset with your partner because they haven't delivered something to you, whatever it is that you want, and then there's two questions that arises, right? Are you just like immature and greedy and self-centered, or are they useless and incapable of delivering? And neither of you know, and you have to sort that out. And then you also, as the injured party, let's say, might regard it as a moral necessity on your part to indicate to your partner exactly what you want, is to tell them. Like, it looks to me like if you did this or said this, then that would satisfy me. And then you might say, well, is that reasonable? Do you feel that it would be reasonable for you to offer that? Would you be willing to offer that? Am I pushing you too far? Those are all things that have to be sorted out. And then you can practice that, and you can practice that with the resolution of every dispute that emerges. If you're willing to take to yourself the responsibility of communicating to your partner your conditions for satisfaction, it means you have to admit them to yourself too, which is also very difficult. And then you can help your partner take stupid incremental steps forward, you know, in the direction that you'd like to see expand, and then you can get better at that. And it's unbelievably useful. You can get better at how you have dinner together or breakfast or lunch. Those things repeat every day, so they're very important. You can get better at how you greet each other when you come home. You can get better at the routine that you fall into, let's say, when you go to bed at night or when you wake up in the morning. All these things that repeat, you know, because that's your life, the things that repeat. You can conceptualize how you might like them to be ordered if they were undertaken in an optimal manner, and you can start incrementally moving forward to that. And you can do that by communicating what you need and want, and by carefully rewarding your partner for taking the appropriate incremental steps forward. And so if you're trying to discipline yourself, you make a goal, you break it down into micro goals, and you implement the micro goals and reward yourself for doing so. And if you do that reliably and you make that a practice, that you'll become more disciplined across time, and you'll move towards the fulfillment of your goals. And that's practically how that's the practical guide for success on that front. You're sitting on the edge of the bed trying to have an honest dialogue with yourself, and the little voice says, you know, it's pretty disgusting in here. And you think, well, I'm way above such trivial niceties as organizing my room. It's like, well, that's pride. That's arrogance. If you're above organizing what's actually yours, how in the world are you ever going to organize anything else? And so you get on your knees and you think, well, it's time to, you know, take a brush to the toilet. And maybe that's where you start. And that works. Like, that works. You start making those micro improvements, like real micro improvements, real on the ground, actual micro improvements to things you know that are wrong, you'll improve unbelievably rapidly. There's always people out there who are doing far better than you on pretty much anything you want to imagine. And if all you're doing is seeing yourself in their reflected light, let's say, then it's going to be pretty damn dismal. But it's not a good comparison because, well, first of all, there's danger in just comparing yourself to others, period, because they're not you. And God only knows what struggles they had to undertake to get to where they were, or what burdens they're currently carrying that you're not aware of. But you can certainly contrast yourself with yourself. And that's a lot better. It is the only way. Well, it's also the only way of really of really measuring anything approximating proper improvement. You can actually tell when you're a little better than you were yesterday.
Right.
And you can actually do that. That's another thing that's so interesting about it, is that you can actually make yourself a little better in some way, pretty much. Well, I don't know if it's at every moment, but you can certainly do it every day. Let's say you want to become who you could be in the fullest sense. So let's say you're someone who's going to solve some serious problems. Okay, the first thing you have to do is admit to the seriousness of the problems. That's no joke. And so the first thing is just the terror of the problem itself. And that's enough to paralyze you, right? And that's the Hydra, that's the Gorgon with the head of snakes. It'll paralyze you and turn you to stone. That's the basilisk in the Harry Potter series.
Mm-hmm.
You look at it and it turns you to stone and lurks underneath everything, right? And it's malevolence and tragedy. And so there's that. And then the next is, well, you're going to take responsibility for that? You're really going to do that, are you? That's a hell of a load, man. And so it's daunting to even consider that. And then there's the discipline and responsibility that necessitates, which is also daunting. It's like, oh my God, the problem's that serious. I'm really going to have to get my act together in order to not contribute to it, much less solve it. And so the problem is terrible. And then the solution is daunting. But the upside of that is like, well, there isn't anything better to have than a problem that's worth solving, like that's really worth solving, right? And so the more of that you take on, the more you have a reason to get out of bed in the morning, no matter what. Like, I'm getting up, I'm trudging forward. Doesn't matter what I'm suffering from. I've got things that need to be done. They're necessary. And that gives you that sense of purpose that is the antidote to bitterness. Okay, well, let's say you want your life to be meaningful. It's like, okay, then what you do matters. It actually matters.
Or how starting to clean up the room changed their life. That's quite fun because it's something I always tell people to do instead of going out and protesting. Jesus, I just can't stand
Cleaning up
that.
the room?
Yeah.
Meaning?
Well, my sense is that if you want to change the world, you start from yourself and work outward because you build your competence that way. It's like, I don't know how you can go out and protest the structure of the entire economic system if you can't keep your room organized. Well, I made a video which was called Message to Millennials, where it was called How to Change the World Properly. A bit of on the pretentious side, I suppose, but I was trying to produce something that was a counterposition to this idea that what you should do is go out and fix up other people. You know, that's just not right. And there's a New Testament line about that, something about, you know, not worrying too much about the log in your neighbor's eye or about the speck in your neighbor's eye when you have a log in your eye. What would the world be like if people stopped avoiding the things they knew they should do? You know, because the question is, how much are we contributing to the fact that life is an existential catastrophe and a tragedy? How much is our own corruption contributing to that? That's a really worthwhile question. Things you leave undone because you're angry, you're resentful, you're lazy, you have inertia. Well, you consult your conscience and it says, well, you know, that place over there could use a little work. It's the same as working on yourself, and so you clean that up because you can. And then things are a little clearer around you. And you're a little better off because you've practiced a bit, and so you're a little stronger, and then something else manifests itself and says, well, maybe you could like take a crack at fixing me up too. So you decide to do that, and then that gets a little bit more pristine, you know, and soon, and it's humble because you're not exceeding your domain of competence. You know, it's like, don't be fixing up the economy, 18-year-olds. You don't know anything about the economy. It's a massive, complex machine beyond anyone's understanding, and you mess with it at your peril. So, and can you even clean up your own room? No. Well, you should think about that. You should think about that. You only have to ask a stupid question once. You ask a stupid question, and if you're in a crowd and you ask a stupid question, 80% of the people in the crowd have the same question. They're just too cowardly to ask. But you ask and then someone actually tells you, you never have to ask that question again. You're no longer stupid. What stupid thing am I doing that I could quit doing? That I would quit doing? Because those aren't the same thing, right? Because you know there's stupid things that you're doing that you're just not going to quit doing because you like them. But there might be something on the edge there where you could stop that. If you want to know something about yourself, sit on your bed one night and say to yourself, you got to mean this, like you got to be desperate. This is no game, this. My life is not everything I want it to be,
And perhaps it's not everything that I need it to be. And by need, I mean my life is so unbearable that the suffering that's attendant upon that is make me nihilistic, cynical, bitter, resentful, driving the proclivity to see evil everywhere except within my own heart. Like, these are problems, man. And you ask yourself, you sit on the bed and say, okay, man, I'm ready to learn something. What's one thing I'm doing wrong that I know I'm doing wrong, that I could fix, that I would fix? It's like, you meditate on that, you'll get an answer. And it won't be one you want, but it'll be the necessary one. You know, and it's often something that will point you to small things. Like, that works. You start making those micro improvements, like real micro improvements, real on the ground, actual micro improvements to things you know that are wrong, you'll improve unbelievably rapidly.
There's never been a better time for the majority of people to be alive. And the future, although we're vulnerable and terrible things can always happen to us, it's hard to make a case that the future doesn't look comparatively positive. We're becoming extremely technologically sophisticated, and the world is changing at an incredibly rapid rate, and the only way we're going to be able to manage that in a positive way is if each of us, or as many of us as possible, are capable of making wise and careful and truthful decisions. And if we do that, then maybe things can continue to improve. You don't get people to stand up on their own 2 feet and to adopt responsibility if everything is given to them. And that's a real conundrum. If you could have what you wanted in this moment, and I could deliver it, what would it be? How much of the mess that you see around you would vanish if the mess that you could put straight was put straight? You know perfectly well that if you put your mind to it and you make the proper sacrifices, there are things you can set straight.
What advice do you have for a young man in his 20s?
Make a plan. Look at what you're interested in. Get disciplined about something. Allow for the possibility that you have something important to contribute to the world, and that the world would be a lesser place without that contribution. Don't be afraid of taking on responsibility. It's where you find what sustains you in your life. You can take on too much responsibility. You have to be cautious in that regard, but that's a less common problem than not taking on enough. A lot of the things that people regard as traps are actually the means to their life.
You have to understand that you're not your own servant, so to speak. You're someone that you have to negotiate with, and you're someone that you want to present the opportunity of having a good life to. And that's hard for people because they don't like themselves very much. You have to believe that your action has some redemptive possibility, because why would you do it otherwise? And you might say, well, I kind of believe that. It's like, well, that's not good enough. You know, you kind of got to throw yourself all into it. And what's the cost anyways? It's not like you're going to get out of this alive. So you're pretty much all in whether you want to be or not. And maybe if you were voluntarily all in, things would be a lot better than they are. If the world isn't everything that you want it to be, maybe you're not acting the way you should. One of the things people do to buttress themselves against failure is to never let themselves really gain clarity about what they need and want. Let's say you try something, but you only do it half-heartedly. And then you fail, and you think, well, I didn't really fail because, you know, I held a bunch back in reserve, and so I didn't get what I wanted, but maybe had I been all in, I would have. And so you don't have to upbraid yourself too much for the failure. Now, it's a catastrophic way to live, to sit on the fence and to not commit, because instead of risking the possibility of failure, you engage in what's essentially the absolute certainty of failure. Because if you want something worthwhile and difficult, which you probably do if you want to have an adventure and go somewhere, then what's the chance you're going to get it if you're halfway in? You can't be halfway in, but that sort of protects you against failure, because you can tell yourself, well, if I tried, I could have done it. It's like, you know, you tell yourself that 200 times and your life's over. Better have a valued goal, because otherwise you can't get any positive motivation working out. And so the more valuable the goal, in principle, the more the micro processes associated with that goal start to take on a positive charge. And so what that means is, well, you get up in the morning and you're excited about the day, you're ready to go. And so as far as I can tell, what you do is you specify your long-term ideal, you specify your goal. You do that in some sense as a unique individual. You want to specify goals that make you say, oh, if that could happen as a consequence of my efforts, it would clearly be worthwhile. Would it really be so terrible if my life wasn't miserable? Would it be so terrible if I got what I wanted and needed, especially if I was doing that in the best possible way?
Well, there isn't anything better to have than a problem that's worth solving, like that's really worth solving, right? And so the more of that you take on, the more you have a reason to get out of bed in the morning, no matter what. Like, I'm getting up, I'm trudging forward. Doesn't matter what I'm suffering from, I've got things that need to be done. They're necessary. And that gives you that sense of purpose that is the antidote to bitterness. So, yeah, there's lots of reasons to, you know, because I've thought for a long time, imagine you have a choice in front of you, because you do. So here's the choice. Your life is either meaningful or meaningless. Okay, so let's go through the meaningless part first. Because you think, well, of course I don't want it to be meaningless. It's like, yeah, just hold on a second. Nothing you do matters. And so impulsive pleasure is the order of the day. No responsibility. You can do whatever you want. It's like Pleasure Island in Pinocchio, right? Or it's like Neverland in Peter Pan. You're still a kid. You can play all the time. Yeah. Impulsive pleasure and no responsibility. That's the reward for meaninglessness. Well, but then the other side is, okay, well, let's say you want your life to be meaningful. It's like, okay, then what you do matters. It actually matters, right? Make a mistake, hurts you, hurts your family, hurts the world in a deeper way than you think. And you have to be awake to that. And then you have to take it on yourself.
Here's some items, so you guys can do a quick big 5 on yourselves. And I'll tell you the upside and downside of it. So, if you're orderly, you follow a schedule. How many of you follow a schedule? Okay. And how many of you don't? Okay, so one thing I would recommend is that you do. And I'll tell you why. Like, intelligence is a very good predictor of academic performance. And there's not a lot you can do about your intelligence. I mean, you can squander it, but it's very difficult to improve it. Conscientiousness, well, it's a trait too, so it's hard to work on, but we know that conscientious people get better grades. And it's reliable, and it's a powerful effect. And so, if your time use is organized, then the probability that you're going to be successful is very high. So, one of the things you might think about is make friends with a calendar, like Google Calendar or something like that. And I can tell you some tricks about that, because really it is important. Like, and I'm not kidding around about this. If you're low in conscientiousness, it's really going to trip you up as you walk through life. There's not very many advantages to it that I've been able to see. And I'm not assuming that just because you don't follow a schedule, you're low in conscientiousness, but it is one of the items that mark it. The advantage I've seen so far to being unconscientious is that if you become unemployed, it doesn't bother you as much. And I mean, that actually turns out to matter in some situations. So, like, you know, if a big company has to shed 50% of its employees, it's the conscientious people are going to suffer themselves to death for it. And the unconscientious people, they're not going to care anyways, because they weren't working anyways. So it doesn't matter if they have a job or not. So here's one way of thinking about making use of a schedule. Often people are afraid of schedules because they think of them as a trap. You know, you make a schedule and that's like this little prison that you have to live inside. And, you know, and all you're doing in your schedule is putting down things you have to do or should do. And so, you know, there's not a lot of fun in that. And so not only is it a trap or a prison, but it's kind of an unpleasant one. But a way to work with a schedule in a lot more sophisticated way is to think, well, I'm going to plan the next week, say, because you plan it day by day, but we'll take the week as the unit level of analysis and think, well, I'd like to plan a week I'd like to have. And then your schedule all of a sudden becomes a tool for increasing the quality of your life. And that's a whole different issue, you know, because you might think, what's the emotion that you suffer, assuming you suffer one of these emotions, if you have an essay that's due and you're not doing it? Like, would you regard that as a pleasant emotion or unpleasant emotion? Okay, so do you think you can characterize the unpleasantness? Like, what kind of emotion is it? It's guilt, okay. Anything else? Frustration? Yeah, so you're sort of frustrated with yourself. Yeah, you need a slap, right? You think, I need a slap. So, okay, so guilt, anything else? Anxiety? Restlessness? So that's kind of an agitation. Yeah, it's because your body knows you should be doing something, but you know, you're not pointing it in the right direction, so it's shame? Is that reasonable? So, okay, so the reason I was asking you about that is because, you know, most of the negative emotions are associated with neuroticism, but some of them seem to be associated with conscientiousness. And the conscientious negative emotions seem to be guilt and shame, fundamentally. And so recent research, and really recent, I only got this paper like a week ago, I think it's about 4 months old, seem to indicate that conscientious people feel less guilt, but they're more guilt prone. So if they don't do something, that makes them guilty, but they organize their time so they are doing the things they're supposed to do, so then they don't feel guilty. So anyways, back to the schedule. So, all right, you think about your week and you think about your day, and you think, well, how would you improve the quality of a given day or a given week? Well, one of the ways of improving it is to not put yourself into the situation where there are things hanging over your head that you have to feel guilty and ashamed about, because that's a very unpleasant way of being. And you know, if you have an essay that's due in a week and you're procrastinating, then the fact that you have to do that essay can ruin the whole week. And even when you're doing something that's positive, hypothetically, it's kind of that horrible kind of positive that you experience when you know that you should be doing something else. And so that's when you end up watching YouTube videos about like dancing cats or something like that. You know, and it's at best it's a guilty pleasure. It's not a pleasure at all. You think like, what the hell am I doing watching videos of dancing cats, you know? But then you know that you're procrastinating, and that's low quality, very low quality existence. So if you use your schedule, you can think, okay, well, here's some times that I'm going to do this work. And then you can also sort of ask yourself about that when you're designing your schedule. Because you don't want to design a schedule like you're Adolf Hitler telling yourself what to do, you know, because you're not going to comply with it then. What you have to do if you're going to design a schedule is you have to ask yourself, all right, I'm going to set aside some time to study over the next week or to do this essay or whatever it is. How much time would I actually spend studying? An hour or two a day might be a worthwhile thing to schedule in, and I would say don't schedule in more than that to begin with, because then you'll fail and then you'll stop using the schedule. And so the other thing you want to do is you want to schedule in things that you want to do, and then you want to look at the day or the week and you want to think, hey, that's a week I'd like to have. If I had a week like that, it would be good. You know, I'd be caught up so that all that negative emotion doesn't have to accrue. And I would have done a bunch of things that I'm interested in doing, and at the end of the week I'd be in better shape than I was at the beginning. And if you treat a schedule like that, so that what you're using it is to design the days and weeks that you want to have, instead of using it as this little, you know, jail that you have to put yourself in that you're not going to do anyways, then you can learn to use them. And that's one thing you can do to make yourself more industrious, more conscientious. Follow a schedule.
I've told people to learn to use a schedule, and people often hate schedules because they act as their own tyrants, right? They say, well, you have to do this unpleasant thing, and then here's another unpleasant thing you have to do, and then you have to do this unpleasant thing, and you do that for about 3 days, and you think, to hell with this, I'm not doing that, you know, and you fall off the wagon. That isn't what you're supposed to do with a schedule. You're supposed to use it to design the days that you would like to have if you were taking care of yourself. And so some of that is, you know, you wake up in the morning and you think, here's 5 things I have to do that if I don't do, my life will be worse. It's like paying bills, for example, or taking out the garbage. It's like you have to do those because otherwise things degenerate. So you got to put some of those in the schedule because otherwise tomorrow is worse than today, and that's a bad trajectory. But you also want to build in things, you've got to act in some sense like you're dealing with a relatively recalcitrant 9-year-old. It's like, well, here's some things you have to do, but here's some things that if you do, you could reward yourself with. And if you get the balance there between obligation and reward right, then you'll find that you're motivated to do the things. And that's what you want to do. You want to do that so it's sustainable across days and weeks and months. And so you got to treat yourself like a good boss would treat a valued employee, and not like a tyrant would treat a slave, because the slave will rebel. And people say, well, I don't follow through on my plans. It's like, well, A, they're probably not very well formulated, and maybe you're doing them because of an external moral obligation or something. They're not really your plans, right? And B, you're acting like a tyrant and a slave, and that's a bad relationship to have with yourself. Treat other people as you would like to be treated. It works both ways. You also treat yourself like you treat other people properly. So that's a necessary thing, and often people don't do that. But the scheduling is really important.